So, after watching episode 2 of the latest season of House of the Dragon, I'm left with well, two main impressions of the show so far. The number one, and this should come as no surprise to anyone, is that Emma D'Arcy can freaking act. Like, seriously, the performances in this show are just generally stellar, like all around. But Emma really kills it in this episode in particular, like kind of perfectly portraying the anguish and the heartache and just the agony suffered by Rhaenyra Targaryen. But that leads me to the second impression that I had for the show, and that is kind of what are they doing with Rhaenyra? Because the writers just kind of seem to, and this sounds a little harsh, but they seem to just hate a woman with agency. Like in this story, they just seem to, like, Emma spends the entire time killing it with like the anguished cries and the reluctant, kind of frightened, worried queen angle that the writers have put in the script, right? But I just can't help but wonder, why is she so reluctant, right? So scared. Like this is Rhaenyra freaking Targaryen, who was the she's willing to go to war over the Iron Throne, willing to send thousands of innocent people to their deaths over her dad's big metal chair. Which is, always the crux of, all these conflicts. There's that element of moral ambiguity there. But I just think if you're willing to go to war anyway, maybe, like her characterization seems a little spotty, a little off, and I'm certainly not going to, admonish the character for, spoiler alert, grieving the loss of her son, her child. On the contrary, that's one of my favorite scenes in the episode is Rhaenyra sort of mourning Jace and trying to wake him up, just losing it. It's all very well written and Shakespearean, sure. In fact, A Song of Ice and Fire is kind of built on crazy Shakespearean moments. And as a writer and enjoyer of such things myself, I have no notes. That's, possibly one of my favorite scenes in the episode, at least. I'm not going to say it is my favorite, but it's close. And I just like it. But Rhaenyra is just so weird in this show. She's just strangely kind of inconsistent, or seems to be, and I guess more importantly than that, the crux of it is just like, I'm not perhaps the best person to be talking about this, in all fairness, but plenty of people more qualified than me have shared their thoughts and opinions on why on their problems with the show, and I have kind of taken their outrage to heart. I get it, I guess. Perhaps not the whole of it, but suffice to say, I'll just say that the show seems to loathe the the thought of giving their leading female characters much agency at all, which is weird coming from a show allegedly about feminism, misogyny, all that good stuff, fertile grounds for conflict and for juicy characterization. A good story can be told, in on that front. But it's just Rhaenyra and Alicent, the leading ladies of the show, just rarely seem to like want anything for themselves. Like they never seem to do much of anything entirely of their own volition. They're always being pushed and pulled one way or another by outside forces. There's not much ambition that is theirs alone. No desires beyond some of the more basic human emotions that are only made interesting by the fact that they have just such incredible performers, such phenomenal acting that's on display. That's, they're working really hard to make up for a kind of a kind of off seeming script which doesn't seem to respect them very much. And it's not like the other characters suffer much from the problem, you know, although arguably, like, they suffer a little. Like Aemond, of course, famously, the death of Luke Valerian has been talked to death a million times over about how weird a choice it was to make that such a kind of bungled misunderstanding where Aemond didn't really have any control over the situation. That's just weird, seeing as in the book, the history, it's pretty clear in pretty much all the versions that uh Aemond is just sought out Luke to kill him. It was a weird decision. Like Damon, on the other hand, I'd argue he's probably the character with the most, like, to say and do at any given moment. And it should come as no surprise to you then that Damon is the fan favorite character, right? He's the only one that seems like real. He has these morbid desires and these crazy ambitions, but at least he has desires and ambitions, right? He's always doing something, and he's always formulating these crazy plans. And those desires and those plans, they all leak from a childhood history, trauma and all that. And it all kind of comes together in such a way that we understand Damon much better than we understand most of the other characters, even if we don't condone his actions. I've Some people have made excuses for him. I don't think you can make excuses for Damon, really, because Damon is awful. It's just in the books. Rhaenyra is also awful, and so is Alicent, pretty much. Everyone is kind of awful because they're all freaking Targaryens, and the Targaryens suck, except for the Targaryens just kind of suck. Like, I'm afraid to say it. I hate to quote the quote, but this show has yet to give us the spectacular line that is uh, "Bastard blood shed in war" from Alicent, and it's an amazing line that infuriates me that we haven't got that yet, and probably never will, because Alicent in this is just not the kind of character who would say that. I don't think we've heard anyone say that line, and that is a crying shame. In the quest to make Rhaenyra and Alicent these very likable characters, I think the writers have only gone to make them just kind of victims of circumstance. Incidentally, characters who are unable to speak for themselves or want anything for themselves. They're relegated to the backgrounds of their own stories, unable to take action without first a man coming along to force their hand. Um, Olenna Tyrell is spinning in her grave, suffice to say, let alone Cersei or Catelyn, right? But all this to say, it's still kind of a good episode, honestly. Like, all things considered, you've got these amazing scenes with Daemon wrecking shop at King's Landing and telling the dragon seeds off for being idiots. And Aemon, he arrives at Harrenhal in this episode, coming face to face with a witch, and all the while giving his best, like, Elric of Melniboné impression. You have in the Vale of Arryn, you've got, I think her name is Rhaena. Rhaena arrives with her new dragon, seeking asylum, wanting to hide out, as it were. And actually, that scene is interesting because it does have some female characters with taking some agency here. So points there. That was actually a good scene. And meanwhile, you have Bela, right, the sister, hanging out with her. Are they cousins? I want to say cousins. The High Valyrian family trees tend to get a little bit confusing, but yeah, they rescue the sea snake, my man Corlys Valerian, from the waters of the gullet, and that's fun. You've got a great line there too, with him saying if this is the price of victory, then I hope never to see another. I think it goes something like that. It's a really good line, actually, um, and it all comes together at the end. In the battle at the end, a kind of mini siege, I guess, of King's Landing, with the kind of cute inversion of Ned's, final showdown in the throne room. Great stuff, but it only goes to show, really, that um, it kind of just emphasizes, I think, how the writers just they waste the acting talent. They go out of their way to waste the acting talents of Emma Darcy and Olivia Cook and Fia, even, right? Helena's actress. Brilliant performers relegated to kind of basically background roles while Damon gets to chew the scenery, and Aemond and all those other guys. I mean, not that you need to wield a cool magic sword in order to be seen as a badass. Again, we can point to Elena Tyrell on that front, just to see this like domineering, badass character done right. A little old woman who couldn't be further from a warrior, somehow managing to emasculate Tywin Lannister and get away with it. Um, and worst of all, I think in this episode, it's not actually worst of all, but it bothers me. Rhys Evans, an actor I love, gets to return as Otto Hightower only for 5 minutes before being offed. By Rhaenyra, at least, so there's some agency for you. But the scene seems structured in such a way to kind of emphasize her ineptitude, which is really freaking weird. When that's not like what you want from your um, never mind. There's there's there. Them's my thoughts on the second episode. I still do have hopes for the show. I think that it's possible that they could be trying to course correct somewhat, like resolving some of the matters left kind of up in the air by the last season, and perhaps maybe even trying to forge on to something new. Maybe even getting away from the internalized misogyny. Again, that's what I hope they're doing. We'll see. So yeah, but